Is a seventh-generation native of Gordon County. He is married to Marie Elmore, and they have one son, Dennis. Padgett was one of the founding members and served as chairman of both the Gordon County Historic Preservation Commission and the Friends of the Resaca Battlefield. He's also serving as a historic advisor to the Gordon County Fort Wayne Civil War Historic Site and the Resaca Battlefield Historic Site. Through efforts working with the national, state, and local officials, nearly 1,200 acres of Civil War battlefield land has been preserved in Gordon County. Padgett has been well recognized in both national and local publications, books, and television documentaries relating to his knowledge of Civil War history and preservation efforts in Georgia. Padgett is noted for working with the Civil War Trust, National Park Service, and Georgia State Parks, Georgia Department of Economic Development, and the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. He has been a team player with many organizations in order to promote historical tourism, preservation, and education within Gordon County. Padgett's family and researching local history is the joy of his life. Join me in welcoming Ken Padgett.
Wow, we're here today, aren't we? Finally. There are some appreciations I'd like to make, please. I'd like to thank a small organization that started 20 years ago this summer, the Friends of the Resaca Battlefield. Jewel and all the board members, if you will, raise your hand. And you can see those folks here and thank them. They've worked tirelessly as a team. I'd like to thank the National Civil War Trust that helped fund some of the battlefield here, Georgia Battlefield Association, the Georgia Heritage Trails, the Georgia Civil War Commission, the Georgia Department of Natural Resources and their staff, who I've made many, many dear friends with and enjoyed working with, the National Park Service, and especially the Gordon County Board of Commissioners. There's nothing I can say to thank y'all for what you've done. And I'd also like to recognize, as Commissioner Stewart did, the past Gordon County Commissioners, Alvin Long, Judy Bailey, and the late Richard Gordon, and Duck Townsend, who was involved in the original talks about the battlefield. And I'd like to thank a dear friend of mine, County Administrator John King. John, thank you for everything. You've just been a real godsend to Gordon County. Gordon County Parks and Recreation staff, the Gordon County Chamber of Commerce and Convention and Visitors Bureau. We couldn't have done this without those folks. The Community Foundation of Gordon County and Gordon County Sheriff Mitch Ralston and his devoted staff, who has shown interest in this from day one and have been an internal part in getting the park open for us. And I too would like to thank the families of Scott and Amy Fletcher for letting us have access for many years into the site, and the Terry Brown family. And I'd like to thank somebody especially, and his widow's here today. I'd like to thank the late Dr. Phil Sechrest, the former mayor of Resaca, Joe Don Griffith, and Mr. O.J. Keller, who had a lot to do with the development of this site over the years. Now, I've aggravated Administrator King. I'm getting my 93 pages of notes out today. Just kidding. Would like to point out a little something, the way we started this park. And the credit is not mine. It's just the way this ended up. Sometimes too much praise has been given to me for starting something that so many people had a hand in. But in 1989, Dr. Phil Sechrest and I were avid relic hunters. One day in the wintertime, on the hill behind here, we were sitting in the fortifications, and I can't remember which one of us brought it up, but it said, man, this place is so beautiful, it needs to be a park. Could you ever imagine? And that was kind of the inception of this great park. And through that idea, it just kept getting mentioned by more and more people. And during the journey, the Friends of Resaca was formed in '96. And today we gather on the historic battlefield to honor those brave men who fought, died, and were wounded here. But their sacrifices ended up forging the strongest nation on earth, America. So we've got to honor them. The causes of the American Civil War is quite complex. It's still debated today. It has to do with state rights, what we're still debating today. The injustice of slavery, unfair trade tariffs, and etc. So we still see these issues affecting our society. The ranks of these men were composed not only by famous military leaders, but fathers, sons, uncles, brothers, mill workers, farmers, attorneys, blacksmiths, business owners, and so on and so on. On the deadly killing fields of Resaca, a bayonet, mini ball, or cannonball could not discriminate who it was going to wound or kill. On this part, many military legends arose. Names like Johnston, Hardee, Claiborne, Hood, Wheeler, Sherman, Hooker, McPherson, Schofield, Cox, and many other commanders that gained notoriety here. But they were also the lesser known heroes. Common people like Sam Watkins that wrote his diaries, and also the children that fought here of the Georgia Military Institute. It's a very little known fact. On the northern end of the field, 9 to 12-year-old children were put in the line of battle and actually got to fire 3 volleys into the federal lines in their red dress uniforms, and then were hastily snatched off the field, put on a train back to Marietta. And there were a guy named Levi Schofield. Levi Schofield happened to be part of an honor guard of the 103rd Ohio Infantry. Just north of us, you can walk across Camp Creek Bridge and see the area where the 103rd Ohio were pinned down, and many of them died in the creek bed there. They erected a huge monument to Resaca in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm not sure Mr. Bill Shark is here today or not. I know he was coming, but he is the historian from that town. And the monument to Resaca is nearly as big as that pavilion. It's quite impressive. Now, the first actions occurred near the point where you turned into the park on May the 9th, 1864. Federal General McPherson approached Resaca with 20,000 troops, overlooked the small farming village and railroad community of Resaca, and all he could see was entrenchments. Suddenly, the guns at Fort Wayne, the Confederate guns there, opened up, and a small battalion of men demonstrated towards McPherson, unnerving him, causing him to pull back to Snake Creek Gap and entrench. It's noted as one of the most major mistakes made in the entire Civil War, when McPherson could have waltzed into downtown Resaca and cut off Confederate General Joe Johnston's army of retreat. There were 2,500 Confederates garrisoned in Resaca, opposed to 20,000. On the 13th, 152 years ago today, skirmishing started just south of here and continued along the lines. Both the Confederate and Federal armies had rushed to Resaca. The Federal Army under William T. Sherman bringing 105,000 man fighting force, and Confederate Joe Johnston bringing a 55,000 man fighting force to Resaca. The battlefield is anchored on the Oostanala to the Conasauga River, runs approximately 5 miles long, and if you look at the maps at the Friends of Resaca table, you'll note it looks like a fish hook upside down. On May 14th, hail would rain down on these fields. Both of the armies were totally engaged. On the north end of the battlefield, a Confederate general named John Bell Hood would throw his forces into the Federal flank, trying to turn that flank and crush them. That attempt failed. But on the northern end of this park, as I'd mentioned earlier, there were a Federal general named General Henry Judah. He fairly well decimated an entire division of useless assaults across Camp Creek Valley here. It was known as the Valley of Death, and the Federals also noted that it ran red like with blood in it for 2 days after the battle. They attacked the Confederate position that was heavily fortified with infantry and artillery and paid the cost. Now, the color guard of the 103rd Ohio was probably the bravest men on the battlefield. Everybody wanted to take the color guard out. The entire color guard were either killed or wounded at the high water mark at the base of the hill, just a half a mile up the trail. Today, after the ceremony or when you come back, you can walk up and see the monument that veterans came back to in 1905 and erected here to celebrate that. On the 16th, the battle continued. The Confederate forces learned that the Federals were crossing at Calhoun Ferry, just outside of Calhoun, and that as they prepared to pull back, Confederate General Hood made another failed attempt to turn the Federal flank. Pretty well decimated a lot of his forces, including some of my ancestors that fought in that action. And many of you here today wonder, why is Resaca so important? Why do we just keep hearing about Resaca? And I'd like just to go over a few things before I close. Numerically, Resaca was the largest battle fought in Georgia soil in history at one battle, at one time where everybody was engaged. It was the first major battle of the Atlanta campaign. All reserves were thrown forward. Resaca was the first battle that Sherman used his superior numbers to flank the Confederate Army, making them repeatedly withdraw towards Atlanta. And Resaca was the place of one of the greatest mistakes of the Civil War, where McPherson didn't march into Resaca and cut off Johnston's line of retreat. The Confederate Army lost its only 4 cannon in the entire Atlanta campaign on May the 15th off Chitwood Road, which is commemorated by a historical sign on the north end of this park that talks about the Cherokee Battery. Those boys were from Floyd County. Most of them died that day. We have one of their ancestors, or one of their descendants rather, here today with us. Today, this site is rated one of the top battlefields in the nation for the condition of part of its pristine earthworks, which I hope you get to visit. It's the only major battlefield in the United States that you can drive down the interstate, get off an exit, make a U-turn, and go into the battlefield. So, aren't we blessed for that? I don't think William T. Sherman and Joe Johnston could have planned it any better on that part. Battle of Resaca would cause between 5,500 and 8,000 casualties, earned 6 Congressional Medals of Honor, and later produced one American president, Benjamin Harrison, for his actions here. And the battle would affect the civilian population for decades. In closing, I'll recall back to one of my heroes, Sam Watkins, in his book Company H. And Sam wrote about after the war. And to paraphrase his remarks, it's there's no south, there's no north, there's no east, no west, only a point on a compass. God bless America, and thank y'all very much. So nervous, I sat down. Representative Meadows said, "Did you forget something?" I'd like to introduce my great friend, Representative John Meadows from the 5th District. John used to be my former boss, and he can tell you terrible things about me. And the best thing is John has been a friend. He's been a great friend for the efforts. And if it wasn't for John Meadows, this park, we wouldn't be here today. I guarantee you, it just would not happen. He's a politician that answers his phone, regretfully for me sometimes. And when you call him, you get action. So in closing, I want to say, John, we thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, Representative John Meadows.
Good afternoon. No, I regretted every one of those phone calls. Just to be totally honest with you, it is without a doubt one of the truths of life that this park is Kenny Padgett's life. I'm going to try to be short, and y'all know how hard that is for me. But I got on to Kenny for the last time we spoke out here. He spoke 32 minutes. Y'all are lucky. Again, how ironic is it that on Friday of May the 13th, 1864, this battle was begun. 152 years later, Friday, May the 13th, we're celebrating that battle. Most of the battle was done on the 14th, but it started on the 13th. We lost, like Kenny said, 6,000 to 8,000 men and children. Those children fought in the war. This is a dedication for the site. When you dedicate something, you need to say thank you to somebody. I get to say thank you to each and every one of you. I get to say thank you to the friends of the Battle of Resaca. They're underneath the tent over here, and nobody's supposed to say this, but I'd urge you, they got no way of making money unless you join and help them. So go over and join up. The Gordon County Commission. This commission and past commissions have worked tirelessly on this project, and it is nice that it comes to fruition on such a beautiful day. I've already said thank you to Kenny and y'all. He has worked his butt off for at least 15 years on this project. The Chamber of Commerce, who've always been there for us,